Good afternoon, everyone. It's a happy Tuesday, and you're with America's Some Assembly Required. Today, we're going to be talking about the role of sheriff on our state's assemblies, especially in our county. And so, our today, Anna is not going to be able to make it. Evidently, Harold is not feeling real well, and she needed to go and take care of Harold. And so she has asked to and begged your forgiveness for not being here to answer your questions. But we're going to continue on with learning on the sheriffs, and I hope that we're going to be able to maybe answer some questions along the way. So let's talk about our sheriffs. In our state assemblies, in our 4 assembly pillars, our sheriffs are listed. But really, our sheriffs exist on our counties. To begin with, within our assemblies, our sheriffs are tasked with beginning to pull together the sheriffs, pull together those that are interested in being a sheriff, and bringing about a general education to those sheriffs. So in that process, they're beginning to not only train themselves, but begin to look at what our public law really is, what they really do as a county sheriff, what their role as a peacekeeper, because they are the head peacekeeper on their county, and what that all involves and entails. And so that's what we're going to talk about today a little bit. And one of the resources that you can go and maybe your assembly can chip in and use for your sheriffs is the Brent Allen Winters American Sheriff course. And so it is a paid course, but you can buy that course collectively and then be able to study along with that to give your peacekeepers a little bit more of an idea of what is expected of them as a county sheriff. You know, we've all grown up with that county sheriff, maybe a fear of our county sheriffs, but our county sheriffs are really supposed to be there to protect the people of the county and to protect their assets. Our county sheriffs are not necessarily there to enforce codes, regulations, or statutes, because those are not part of our jurisdiction. And we have to stop for a minute when we talk about sheriffs to talk about jurisdictions. So our counties are what is called a national jurisdiction. And they have a physical border, a boundary. Some of our counties may bump up against a state border as well, the collective, the general, concurrent jurisdiction of our assemblies at the state level. And so we're going to be, looking at that from basically kind of 2 aspects. The sheriff has the responsibility for the people in his county. And in a way, he is, in his national jurisdiction, he is the absolute law authority on his county. FBI can come in, he can throw them out. CIA can come in, he can throw them out. Military comes in, he can throw them out. The state assembly can come in, he can throw them out. Okay? He is the highest peacekeeper on his county. And he ensures that the people are not tread upon within his county. Now, because we've been indoctrinated to the de facto county of sheriff, we have to understand the difference between our land and soil sheriffs and our county sheriff, our county of sheriffs. And so our county of sheriffs are corporate employees. Most of them are employed by the county corporation. Some of them actually have reciprocal agreements with maybe the city that they're located in. And they have, and so they basically are serving 2 masters, and they can't do that well. And that's one of the biggest problems with our county sheriffs in trying to get them to recognize the land and soil jurisdiction, even though they have a dedication to the Constitution and to you, the people of the land, because they have this corporate contract, you see. Now, there are a few very bold county of sheriffs out there who will basically say to their county, you have to uphold the law, and this is not lawful. But there are very few. And the reason is it goes back to that contract that they have with the county of, that corporate contract that serves the corporation and protects the assets of the corporation, the perceived assets of the corporation. And now they've got to make a choice between whether or not they are going to take and serve the people of the land and uphold the Constitution, or if they're going to support their county of corporation. And the rub comes in there because if they don't support that county of corporation, then the county of corporation is going to seek to have them removed from office. And they'll mount a very effective campaign against them. And so that county of sheriff has some very dire choices that they have to make in those decisions. But their true, really true duty is to people of the land and to protect their property. And they should be serving and making sure that due process has happened, not look the other way. And so our county of sheriffs are really conflicted, and they have that conflict of interest because they've got two masters. Do they serve you, the American people, or do they serve the county administration and keep their jobs? And this is really a great example of why within our jurisdiction, we do not want to have anyone who has an elected position who has a conflict of interest. Who do they serve? Do they serve the state that may come in and the state of that corporation that comes in and bears upon them? Do they serve the county of organization that bears upon them to serve within a specific contract? Okay. You might say, well, I don't really have a contract. Well, if you've got a license, say as a doctor or a nurse or a teacher, or you work for a municipal corporation, you essentially have an agreement with them. And if you don't mind not having your job there, then you're going to do the right thing. But otherwise, you're going to be conflicted, and you're going to have to make that choice to either serve that other corporation or to serve what is really lawful. So that's really the difference between and why we need to really be watching for those conflicts of interest. Now, is it possible that a county of sheriff can serve also as a sheriff within our assemblies? Yes. But he probably won't be, or she won't be, a county sheriff for their corporation for more than an election cycle, because they will want them out, because they will have to serve the public law and not serve the code, statutes, and regulations inside the corporation. And so maybe I need to back up for a minute too and make sure that you understand that their public is actually private. When Anna says that, what she means is that they appear to be public, but they are a corporation. They are a separate entity. And their rules, their regulations, their codes really do only apply to their employees. And who are their employees? Well, anybody that works directly for them or anyone who is a U.S. citizen, because according to their 14th Amendment, it made almost everyone a U.S. citizen unless you revoke and renounce and reclaim your American heritage, your inheritance. And that would be the inheritance of freedom and sovereignty within our assemblies. So that's the difference. That's what makes a county F sheriff so conflicted. Now, our sheriffs are a different proposition. Our sheriffs serve and have a singular focus to serve the people and protect the people and their property. They're not out there to chase you down. They're not out there to be road pirates. They're not out there to take your home away. In fact, they're there to defend you and make sure that due process is served. And it's one of the reasons why it's so important to be to try to get, as our states develop, a county sheriff in place. So we'll take a step back. We have to assemble our states first. It is primary to our mission. It's where we and those sheriffs get their state authority. Now, you can say, okay, well, but Lisa, now you're speaking two things. If they're on their county, they're in national jurisdiction, and they're the highest law enforcement officer in the county. That's true. But without our states standing and without our states recognizing them as law enforcement, basically commissioned through our states' assemblies to be county sheriffs, they lack the state authority to be their county sheriff. Okay? So without that, they're seen more or less as impersonating an officer of the court. Why is that? Because if your state is not standing and you don't have a state court, you don't have officers of those courts to serve in and out of those courts. We have to have a way to be able to adjudicate the affairs of our people and provide them remedy through the law. And that starts at our state court and our state jural system. And then it flows down into the counties as they develop. All right. So with that said, we have a lot of states that are trying to set up their counties when their focus needs to be on their state, because that's where the authority flows through. And so with that said, you say, okay, well, Ohio has right now 5 counties that have sheriffs. We have 5 elected public sheriffs. But their county isn't organized yet. Well, as we populate our states, as Anna would say, we populate our counties. And the job of our counties while we're still assembling is they can assemble, they can meet, they can get to know each other. And that's the first real phase of assembling our counties. And if someone pops up and raises their hand to be a sheriff, then that assembly of people can elect that man or woman as sheriff, right? Without the county being fully seated. And that becomes one of the first parts that they actually enact as a sheriff, as a county. And it's sort of like, in a ways, the way our states began to form is we got a coordinator, and the coordinator went and looked for a marshal at arms. And then they went and looked for a treasurer. And then they looked for a records keeper. And our counties are going to form sort of in the same way. They're going to look for maybe a sheriff or a marshal at arms. They're going to start to form that way. But before they form their government, they have to consider where they get their overall protection and authority from. And that's the blanket of the state. Okay? It's the big blanket. So in that, our county sheriffs operate only within their borders, its jurisdiction. And they can only be within their county borders. They can only affect what goes on within there. They have no other authority. I see a question out there, is there a state sheriff? Well, no, there is not. County sheriffs are always county-based. They are constrained by their national jurisdiction, meaning county. Okay? And so understanding the jurisdictions becomes really important, because when they step out of their boundaries, when a sheriff goes outside of their county, they're in international jurisdiction, just like you are. And within that international county, the next county over has a sheriff who'll be happy to put your sheriff back in his county. Okay? So as our states are forming, we're going to try to get up, and Ohio took this approach to it. Doesn't mean it's right, wrong, or the way. But this is how we did it, is we got people together who wanted to be sheriffs, and they started forming a committee. They were beginning to study the law. They were beginning to put together their processes for being a sheriff, or looking at their counties, or training resources. And they started meeting together. Eventually, those sheriff committees will be established on your counties. Okay? And that sheriff committee can be anybody. It isn't just the sheriffs of your county or of your state. It can be anybody who's interested. And in a way, it's to help the counties or the sheriffs form their offices and form their processes and procedures, but it's also about oversight. Okay? We've all encountered county sheriffs who have overstepped basically their authority and overstepped the Constitution. And we, the people, are there to provide those types of oversight to those sheriff committees. So if your sheriff committee is out there telling you that you can't attend because you're not interested in being a sheriff, you tell them baloney, because basically, who's in charge? Within our setup, the people are in charge. And you're permitted to be within those committees, watching over and making sure that our sheriffs are doing the right things. Okay? So sheriff is not a new concept. In fact, the actual kind of term sheriff or reeve goes back into 1778, and it was really within the organization of feudal Europe, of which sheriffs really developed within the whole scheme of law enforcement. And so the sheriff, was there to protect their shire or their county, in a way, from invasion, from even from within, if there was a riot or an insurrection within the county. They were there. Unfortunately, one of their roles was collecting taxes. Think Sheriff of Nottingham, right? And they were there to impanel like a grand jury. They investigated deaths. They executed the writs of the common law courts. And then they were supposed to keep the peace, the order according to the law. And so the sheriff's role really goes back. But one of the things that many of us don't realize is that within our county, our sheriff is actually heads or commands the militia within the county. Who's the militia? It's all those people who stand up and say, I'll go, I'll do it, I'll help. And so the sheriff is there to be able to help organize and take and command his essentially his militia within his county. That doesn't mean that we're not going to have other units within that. That there's going to be maybe a lieutenant or something from the state that's going to also help within the command of our counties. So, but the main job of our sheriff at times will be to call in basically what they call posse comitatus, or the posse. If they have to go out and do a manhunt, if they have to go out, maybe there's a child missing, and they have to go out and do those kinds of searches, they're going to call a posse together. And that posse is basically made up of any man or woman that raises their hand, mostly men. The men of our counties, the men of our state are really responsible for the formations of our militia. Okay? And that's where the militia and our county sheriffs sort of interface. And the militia and our Jural Assembly also interface, because they are the peacekeepers. Okay? And so they become part of that law enforcement / peacekeeping task force within our counties. Okay? They also have to act as jurors. They have to be part and present of our jural systems within that. And that all happens under the sheriff's watch and under his guidance and leadership. One of the main jobs of our sheriffs, besides ensuring public, keeping the peace, ensuring public safety, ensuring the safety of men and women, and upholding that public law, is communication. And we've talked about that before in other episodes, about how communication is so very important on our counties. And so our sheriff, one of their other main roles is to communicate. Our county of sheriffs are there to communicate with, or our county sheriffs are there to communicate with our county of sheriffs. Their liaisons, your county liaison eventually will be there to go communicate with that county of sheriff as well. Maybe they're communicating with the city of personnel, law enforcement. And so the communication models that go between our sheriffs and their counterparts within the de facto governments becomes a very important relationship that has to be developed. Some of that's going to be a tough row to hoe, okay? Because those county of sheriffs don't want to recognize that there's a higher authority on their county. But our sheriffs are actually a higher authority. Our land and soil sheriffs are the highest authority on the county, even over the county of sheriffs. And so there is an important relationship that has to be developed between our land and soil sheriffs and our county of sheriffs. So communication is extremely important. They're going to be working with all of their deputies on their county and their militia on their county. So whoever is going to be your sheriff has to possess those communication skills, written skills, interpersonal skills, conflict management skills, and they have to know how your state assembly and your county assemblies are going to be operating And they've got to know that operation well enough that they can intimately describe that and explain that to their county of counterparts. They have to do it in an effective manner, because essentially the county sheriff can defy those county of judges. We have a different jurisdiction. It's a superior jural jurisdiction to their justice system, or injustice system, if you'd like to say it that way. And so it's really important that we take that into consideration, whether it's you that's considering being a sheriff, or it is someone who is stepping up and you're on the vetting team for that sheriff, that you consider those communication portions within their vetting and within their training. You know, those written communications that I put out there, it's going to be extremely important that they're able to express themselves in direct and succinct ways. It's going to be very important that they know how to handle direct conflict resolution. And, you know, they're not out there to just arrest people and bust knuckles, although they may have to at some point, right? They're mostly there to ensure safety and secure us and our property. So one of the discussions that we had recently on the Ohio Assembly was about what do you do about somebody who's a drunk driver? Can the sheriff arrest them? And my question was, did they do harm? Was there harm involved? Because the main standard of our law is there harm involved? It was quite a discussion, right? Because and I'm old enough to remember the old days. And what would happen is you got picked up by a police officer or a county sheriff, and they took your keys away from you, got you out of the car. Sometimes they'd take the opposite officer that was riding with them, and they would drive that car to your home, park it in the driveway, and keep the keys. And then they would have you come down to the police station or the sheriff's office the next day to pick up your keys. But they kept you safe and everyone else around them safe. There were no charges for drunk driving back then. And same way with, you know, in a way with juvenile, you know, with a juvenile driving offender, okay? They would take that juvenile offender and they might take the car and drive it home for them, or call the parents to come to the site and drive the car home. And then they would go and they would have quite a discussion with the parent about the young man or young woman that were out driving prior to being age of 16. Now, in our jurisdiction, we don't necessarily have that. But we also have to realize that as a parent, and I don't like that word either, but it's the word we have that's most common. As the parent, we accept the responsibility for our property and any damage that they do. We have to be the ones to make sure that they are roadworthy when they get ready to go drive, whether that's at 15 or 16 or 18. Well, and so we have an obligation. And in that case, the punishment for the juvenile might come from the parent. And in that case, the parent is actually held responsible for any damage that juvenile did. If he happened to kill somebody in his bad driving, then it could be the parent that has to provide for the family of the person who was killed or injured. So we have to take start to take those responsibilities very, very seriously. But it's not necessarily something that our sheriff is going to be there and then enact a code to remedy the situation. They have to enact the law, whether it's a standard of harm or not. Okay? And so within that, our sheriffs really have to work hard at those community relations and interpersonal communications and the conflict management that goes with it. They have to know the public law. Okay? Our sheriffs have to look at a group and decide whether that group is creating mischief and harm, to break up the group, to maybe there's harm involved and that's where an arrest occurs, or whether or not it's a group around and they can go and intervene in that group. But it is something that it's more about the community relations with them. And maybe it's just a group that's gathered. We do have the right to assemble, even our young people. And as long as they're not creating harm, there is no reason to break them up in that way, right? So understand that there are some real differences between our sheriff and the law that the law and the people they serve, and the county of's or city of's law enforcement. So our sheriff is the peace officer, and he's distinguished as separately from a police officer. It's one of the reasons we don't have policies on our assemblies, because we don't have policy enforcers or police, which is where they get their name from. And the peace officer's foremost duty is not to just necessarily enforce the law, but they're there to safeguard peace. And he can choose whether or not he's enforcing the law, but the best way is to try to keep the peace. And so, but a police officer, by contrast, or a county of sheriff, their foremost duty is to enforce the codes, statutes, and regulations, protect the properties of the corporation. And he has no discrimination as to whether or not he does or does not in any given instance. Okay? He can prosecute for a thought crime. He can say, well, you were intending to do this, so therefore it's a crime. Okay? Police officers are basically bureaucrats, and they have no real lawful discretion. Most police officers that are out there do not know the law. I was once in a court case. I was acting and providing general counselor for someone who was in de facto court. She went to court, and without telling a really long story, I had led her down a line of questioning for which she was questioning the police officer that enacted a search and seizure, and started asking him particularly about court cases, precedential cases, and constitutional guarantees of our Fourth Amendment. And at one point, as she was leading him down the path, and he was saying, well, I don't know. I don't have any knowledge of that. The judge stopped the proceeding and said, we're done with this line of questioning. He is incompetent to judge the law. And yet, he was the one that brought the charges. And guess what? The case got dismissed because we proved the incompetence of the law enforcer to tell the difference in what the law was. Okay? So that's the difference within some of the basic differences. So with a county of or a city of police officer or sheriff. But a sheriff has the ability to call any free man, okay, to assist in their posse as long as they are willing to uphold the public law. And what is the public law? What is that? That's your unanimous Declaration of Independence, the Northwest Ordinance, the Bill of Rights that we have, that they have to really uphold. Okay, it's not us that necessarily uphold them; it's them that has to uphold them. We turn the tables that way. They owe us good faith service. Okay. And they can call those free men, and as long as they're willing to uphold that public law and to follow the standard of harm or no harm, then they can participate within our militia or our posse, or with even within our Jural Assembly. They can become part of that. So in the old days, part of their rule was the sheriff, a church elder, and a judge, along with a jury. And they would do a trial by jury. And that was how it interfaced within their, at that time, their jural system. So realize that the sheriff has the ability to mobilize people to resist an invasion. And of course, I always tease Michigan about the fact that they tried to invade Ohio in 1835, and the county of sheriffs called out the militia and the state militia to come and defend the state border. And that's one of their jobs, is to defend their borders. And so they can mobilize their people and place them into service as well. So as we begin to develop this county sheriff, we become more aware communication skills are going to be prime for them. And then know that the laws that they're serving, what does our unanimous Declaration of Independence say? What does our Northwest Ordinance? For those of you who don't know, the Northwest Ordinance existed before the first Constitution. And that Northwest Ordinance was about the developing territories north and west of the river Ohio. Ohio was actually the first American state, even back then. Okay. And that set the precedent for everyone north and west of the river Ohio. Well, where does the river Ohio flow? It flows into the Mississippi River. So that included everybody west of the Mississippi River. And the most important part of knowing what that is that common law was called out as the perpetual law on those states and territories. So as we're setting up our courts and we're putting in ex parte Milligan, we're getting our sheriffs to enforce our public law on our counties. It is that Northwest Ordinance that is so vitally important to comprehend. If your assembly has not studied it yet, it is the real point of where you need to start within your Jural Assembly, including your sheriff. Okay? So as we go at there is so much more to learn about our county sheriffs and the duties. They're there. They have to be organizational. They have to organize basically all of their deputy sheriffs which can be appointed by them. They're affirmed or vetted through the county vetting team. They can be appointed by they're appointed by the sheriff, okay, through the county vetting team. The county sheriff is actually vetted through the state assembly. The state assembly vetting team vets the county sheriff, okay? It's that important because he's an integral part of not only the state jural system, but the state militia system as well. And as well as elected on his county then by the people of his county who say, yes, we will follow his leadership. And that's going to be that's an important part. We have to be able to trust our county sheriffs to know that they're going to keep us and our property safe. That's their main job, right? If we can't trust our county sheriff, they don't need to be elected. All right. And that's the county's job, is to make sure they know who it is that they're electing and putting forward as their candidate. Okay. But it's the state vetting team that actually vets them. So as we're interfacing and everything within the state assemblies, you can begin to see how it all meshes together within. So, and I do have some notes, so I'm working on so that our county sheriffs need to realize what our freedoms actually are, what they've established, our right to free speech. It's not nice, but you could go up to a sheriff and say anything you want to their face, and they shouldn't be reactive. They may tell you it's not nice. They may tell you you're out of line. All right. But we have a right to free speech. Even in the other jurisdiction, okay, that has to be upheld. We have a right to assemble. So they can't just say, sorry, you guys need to move out of here. If you're not causing harm. Now, if you're blocking the door, you got a group and you're blocking the door to a business, that could be harm to that business. And they do have a right to move you along. But they have no right to break you up if you're being peaceful about the way you're assembling. Okay. So free speech, free association. Your county sheriff is there to protect your property. As long as you can make direct county claims to your county property that's there, a county sheriff could stop a bankruptcy or a foreclosure, march into court and say, this woman has established her provenance on this property. She has a chain of conveyance, and this property is hers. Dismiss the case. And guess what? They would have to do it. Okay? But it's going to take a bold sheriff, and he's going to have to develop the relationships that build right up to that to be able to stop that action within their commercial system. Okay? Remember who he is. He's the highest law enforcement on the county, even over the county sheriff or a judge or anybody else that walks in his county. Okay? So the federal government can't compel the state to implement any federal regulation programs. That's Prince versus the United States. And so the power is constrained within the county, the laws, the local laws. Now that means that once your counties are set up and you have jural systems, you can take and enact laws, so long as they're consistent with the Unanimous Declaration of Independence, the Northwest Ordinance, and our Bill of Rights, right? But we don't need many laws. When you have a standard of harm or no harm, there aren't many laws that you need. And yes, the 10 Commandments should sort of figure into that. Many states have that in their state house still. Louisiana is one of them. Fought hard to keep it there because those last 5 commandments in 10 Commandments talk about how we're supposed to treat each other and how that's the basis of harm, the standards of harm that can be enacted. Okay. So within that, realize that the federal government, whether that's federal in terms of their federal or federal in terms of our federation, they can't really enact laws that the states are necessarily required to adopt unless all of the states agree to that law, okay, that public law. So our American forefathers and forebears rejected a central government that would act on our states and act through our states, our state of state. And instead, they ratified the Constitution in a way that each of the 50 states have exclusive authority over its own government. Okay, now, this is where it gets really confusing for our de facto government because they think they are all that and a slice of cheese, right? So what they don't understand is in the language of those statements, our states were called out as lowercase. Everything that was not given to the federal 18 enumerated powers through the Constitution were relegated to the states. And that's the lowercase case S-T-A-T-E-S, not the uppercase S-T-A-T-E-S. So we have to really be careful when we're reading because they like to obscure that within and they change it back and forth. And our state of states need to realize that and understand that. And so that's going to be the job of our sheriffs to communicate with their county of sheriff to get that done. So within our county, or within our sheriffs, our county sheriffs, they're the conservators of peace. They have the responsibility of making sure that peace stays in place. And so, and if they have to, they can use the militia, the people of their county, to assist in keeping that peace. They can call a posse to keep that peace. And so, we have the right on our counties under the 4th militia clause of our Second Amendment to keep and bear arms, but we also have to be trained to do that. Our counties may eventually, our sheriffs may have safety marksmanship courses or arms training, cleaning your arms, keeping it in good shape. But most of all, we have to be willing and ready to assist our county of sheriffs in their duties for our counties and keeping the peace. And we have to be willing to be jurors because the only way we keep peace is when we go to court, we participate in a trial by jury. We don't have bench trials. Our justices of peace on our county levels or our justices at state levels, which involve many times capital crimes at the state level, we have to have the ability to have a jury of peers. Generally, that's people on your county or at least close in proximity. Um, that could be across the border, but you'd have to get a hold of the county sheriff next to you to do that, right? So there's got to be some communication that goes back and forth. The sheriff is reposed with the public trust to keep the peace, not only for his county, but for his state and for his electorate. Okay. The sheriff has to be free of any influence of local politics, needs to stay out of it. Even though we don't have political parties, we're still body politics, and the sheriff needs to stay out of those politics. Okay. And he needs to be reserved in his opinion because he could be seen as bias within any kind of action. All right. So that sheriff needs to be very careful about what they participate within. Okay. So the sheriff has to be free of the influence of those local political concerns and the whims of passing crisis, right? There's an old saying that says a crisis on your part is not necessarily a crisis on my part. And I suggest the sheriffs take that to heart, okay? Because they can't just be only responding to just those political types of whims and crises within their county. That also means some of the food fights that we experience on our assemblies are not something they should be involved in. Okay. So, they have to begin to set themselves aside and understand where within their jurisdiction where they are. Okay. So the true power of our country as a collection of 50 states, it can be kind of summed up in the fact that it's about the individual man and woman that has the grit to keep their word, to keep the peace, and that's the greatest protection against our foes, as whether that's domestic or whether that's international in its nature. Okay. So again, within we have to realize that our common law, the law of the land, protects all else, all the freedoms, and all of our relationships, all of the law of promises, everything that goes on, and especially our free speech. So it is really about us being involved and willing to step up and participate with our sheriffs on our counties, be well tuned to who they are, what they believe, test them, talk to them, get to know them, communicate with them on our counties. And eventually, when it's time and our states are standing, that sheriff is going to be there in the meantime to protect us on our county. But when our counties actually do start to stand, they're going to also be there to help us pull together and get our counties up as well, and help our Jural assemblies to form. Okay. So I'm gonna start going through questions. I'm gonna go back up here, and hopefully that helps you get a really good foundation on who those sheriffs need to be and what they need to be doing. Okay. So all right. So there's a question here about any input on how to build our federal postal district courts and how they operate in the scheme of things. So Dave, that is not a subject that we have approached yet. And part of the reason is that we have to have our state assemblies up in order to, and our state jural systems up and working before we can go and have our postal area district courts up. Okay. Those postal area district courts depend on our states to provide their jurors, to provide militia, and to provide our sheriffs within the law enforcement part of our Jural Assemblies. Okay. So again, it's vitally important that we focus on getting our state assemblies up and our state Jural Assemblies and state militias. When we have that up, when our states are able to stand, and at least one, maybe two, to do that in our postal area districts, then we're going to have the ability to have a postal area court. Okay? Even our state justices will be ones that can participate within, I believe, within those postal area courts as the justices as well. So we've really got a lot of work to do, and we need to really focus on that state level because everything else depends on that. Okay. And so I hope that helps in terms of understanding that relationship. I get this question often, way too often. Okay. Is there such a thing as a state sheriff? No, there is no such thing as a state sheriff. We have a marshal at arms or eventually a sergeant at arms, and they will be able to commission other marshals on our state. Marshal at arms, well, marshals. Like, for example, we wouldn't call them a marshal. They would be called like a ranger or a trooper. Although we have state troopers on Ohio, we would probably go with a ranger to differentiate the difference. Okay. And then you have your state chief marshal who would assign marshals within your state. So there's a lot of missing pieces and components that we have to our law enforcement on our states that need to be developed. And that takes people, right? So no state sheriff. We can have a state to begin with, a state sheriff's committee, and that committee may or may not continue on once our counties develop, because the sheriff committees actually really operate within the counties. Okay. Now that doesn't mean that they might not gather all the sheriffs together once or twice a year. Maybe they do a training. Maybe they do some relationship building, communication, coordination, those types of things. But the sheriff committee will eventually, as the counties begin to develop and they get a sheriff, they will have a sheriff committee to help guide, to help them get their guidelines and their work together on their county. Okay. And again, that doesn't have to be all sheriffs. That can be people from the community, from the county, participating within that county sheriff committee. Okay. All right. All right. So if a sheriff holds a license through the state of state and provides security for de facto government agents or agencies, is that a conflict? There's a second half to that question. Is that a conflict? Well, if they're providing to de facto government agents or agencies, Anna has said that a county of sheriff can do that. But if they're above that level, I don't believe that would present a substantial conflict of interest. Okay. And it would have to be something, I would advise that what you do, Susan, is you speak with Chief Continental Marshal Paul Pappas and check that out through Paul to do a background check. Okay. It really depends on the services that he may be providing, what that service contract provides. And then again, it may just be a direct conflict of interest. And so you really need to check that out through the Chief Continental Marshal just to make sure. So you would go to your Marshal at Arms, and you'd have your Marshal at Arms talk with Chief Paul and ask that particular question. You definitely don't want somebody, because which in many ways, which master are they going to serve? Okay, so that's going to be the great conflict, and those are the questions that you have to begin to ask and answer within our state sorry, and county assemblies. All right. So again, he might hold something in their jurisdiction, but the minute they find out he's dueling between the two assemblies and that he's going to uphold the public law, he's probably not going to have a job for long or a license, because they'll pull it. Okay. All right. Let's see if there's another question. All right. Well, I don't see another question at all. Did you? I see one down here in lowercase. Did you say that our sheriffs can have dual citizenship and that they would not have the corporate job for long? And that's true. Okay, they will probably pull the job. They will probably either one seek to get them unelected from their office, or they will take and cut back their funding to force them into retirement, or to not run again. They'll make life extremely difficult on them in order to get that to happen. Okay. All right. So we are just a little over an hour, and I have no other questions. So I am going to say goodbye for today, and hopefully Anna will be able to rejoin us, and I'll start next week with a question about, see what she wants to say about sheriffs, and then we'll move on into our counselors of law and begin to talk about who a counselor of law is and what they do and what they may need to know in order to really effectively be a counselor of law. So I wish you a happy Tuesday. Thanks for coming. I'm sorry Anna couldn't make it. Please pray for and send good wishes and thoughts and energy for Harold, also for Jim, and for Anna. She's got a lot on her plate. She's working hard, and we hope that they both recover and get better quickly, as well as Anna would ask that you please keep the Federation in mind. If you have a few extra dollars that you can send, their need is really great right now to get tires on their RV that they're using to transport around to get banks qualified. So, please consider that. We would really greatly appreciate that. And then my last shameless plug is for the American States Assembly Family Reunion, September 3rd through the 8th. That's going to take place on Put-in-Bay, Ohio. It's an island in the middle of Lake Erie. It is where our International Peace Memorial is actually located for the United States. And so I'll put that in the comments where you can go and sign up if you're interested. The hotel reservations are open. We'll be sending an email out to everyone who has so far signed up and showed interest so that you can go check out the hotels. To begin with, we only have 50-room block at this point. If we fill that 50-room block, they may give us another 50 rooms. So please, get your reservations in early. Remember, it's an island and there is limited hotel space on the island. So we want to make sure that you have the ability to get in and be able to take part in this great. So far, we have 156 people who have signed up. So, please get your reservations in early. So thank you all, and I'll see you next week. Bye.